All right, y'all. So hold on, give me a second. I got to get all my screens taken care of. All right, so what I will talk about is basically using Gemini Gems, and I'm using as a use case use the my use case here is using the gems to help in my HL7 mapping for creating MMGs from Maven. Why is this not doing right? Hold on. All right. The agenda, what we'll cover today is the unique complexities of, this says STD reporting, but I just changed it. We're now doing pertussis because that's what I'm currently working on. So the opportunity is to leverage custom AI to augment our expertise that we've got. And the use case, I'm building a pertussis that I just started this morning, MMG expert with the gems. And then I'm gonna do a live demonstration. I encourage y'all to stop me with questions or even give me some questions to query the AI with. And then we'll—
Could you just go into a brief explainer on what an MMG is for folks who aren't as familiar with HL7? Thank you.
Sorry. All right, an MMG is a message mapping guide. So it's the way that public health authorities send case notifications to the CDC. This is the latest version. There's some old ways that they used to do it under nets and some other things, but this is the latest way that they're doing it. So it uses HL7 to send the guides to CDC, and they're consistently being upgraded. So it's basically just creates an HL7 message, and we're using Maven here in South Dakota as our disease surveillance program. So this, and I'll show you how the gem actually knows quite a bit about MMGs and about Maven when we see this. So I think it'll be pretty amazing to people. So, all right, let's see what's next. All right, so the challenges for public health is, this is really just helping to get, to use a overused term, from data to action. So it's to implement national reporting standards, to create the standard MMG from our existing data stores. These are complex things to get. They've got detailed guides of what to do and how to map different fields. You need to know how your disease surveillance program figures something out and how you have coded it in your disease surveillance system. Then you've got to translate those codes into the codes that CDC uses. They aren't necessarily and probably aren't the same for many of us. And it's high stakes. If it errors out, you can get issues with CDC, having to research it, find out what's going on. It takes a ton of time and effort to figure out what problems are in the data that you sent, fixing it, sending back the correction messages, and doing all that stuff. So anyway, it's a big resource strain. The other thing that gets very hard is, how do you maintain these MMGs once you've created them? How do you update it when you make changes in your surveillance system? And when you make a change in your surveillance system, let's say you change a variable there or add a new variable, how does that affect the MMG? What do you need to do to change that and make it work? All right, this says STD surveillance data. I'm demonstrating pertussis again, we're saying, but the STD relays, there's additional layers of complexity with each unique reportable condition. There's sensitive data elements in them. There's especially some in STIs, but we've still got sensitive data wherever we go. You've got complex lab and treatment data. You've got specific lab tests you're looking for, specimen sources, multiple drug treatment regimens that you need to deal with. And then it's constant evolution. guides and value sets are constantly updated to reflect new clinical and lab practices. For example, in the MMGs, they only want the labs reported that are labs that are applicable to that condition. So for example, they don't really care if I'm doing a pertussis, if I'm reporting a pertussis case, they really don't care about my HIV status. But if I'm doing and reporting on STIs, they do care about the HIV status. So it's not a one size fits all. The expert, here's your opportunity. Have an AI expert on your team as you're developing these. So instead of just doing a general purpose AI, we can make a very specialized gem. And that gem, you give it the sources of truth. You tell it what to base it on. So you're not just using general knowledge. It can leverage the general knowledge, but you sort of direct the AI on where to go. So anyway, and it's always available, so you can always test it when you need to. And it also, I like this, it democratizes expertise. This really allows junior staff and developers to start working at a higher level because they can use the AI to validate things and actually question things and try things out. So here's our use case. We're building a digital specialist for pertussis reporting. The goal is to create a Gemini gem that has expert level knowledge of the CDC pertussis case notification message mapping guide. This gem will be able to answer specific questions about any data element, generate valid HL7 segments for scenarios like lab results and treatments, validate user-provided HL7 snippets, and explains errors based on the guide. All right, so first we're going to go through, and I'm going to show you this in detail in just a second. We're going to build the gem. First, we'll define who is doing this. So in this case, we'll say that you're an expert public health informaticist or epidemiologist or something working for the South Dakota Department of Health, building MMGs. So in this, I gave an example. You're an expert public health informaticist specializing in CDC's STDs case notification MMG. Your knowledge is based on the provided guide and its associated FinVADS vocabulary. Your goal is to help users create, validate, and troubleshoot HL7 messages for STD reporting. Always cite the specific table or section from the guide when answering. You're also an expert coder and will assist in implementing the MMGs and FreeMarker, which is an obscure tool that Maven uses to generate MMGs, and Conduit's Maven disease surveillance product. And then step 2, we'll provide the knowledge base, and I'm going to show you that right now. So let me stop sharing so I can share something else. So let me share again. Window. All right, sorry. All right, does my screen look okay to everybody?
Yep, you're good.
Yep, okay. All right, so to get to the gems, you go to, and I'm using the paid version here, actually, and for anybody who's interested, you can get a free version of the paid version if you have a university ID and register as a student. And I don't know the links, I can try to find them. But otherwise, the pro version is more. You can use the gems on the free version, however you are limited in how much use you can do. It's like $10 a month for the pro version, and God knows I get much more value of that on it all the time. So here I'm in the gem manager. There's some that are pre-made from Google, the coding partner, a chess champ, a career guide, brainstormer. They're cool to work with. But what's real neat is that you can create your own MMGs. I mean, your own gems. So in this one, just this morning, because I just started working on the pertussis MMG, I just copied my STI MMG and did it. So we're going to edit that MMG so you can see what it looks like. So here is my instructions. It's basically what I just read to you a second ago. I also added some other things in here. I added that my model, it's an XML file that says the configuration in Maven of how my diseases are put in. I just put in what contains the Maven model specifications. I told it knows how to look up the FINVADS values at CDC. And then I gave an example of a pre-marker file that I'd already done. So this is all in my instructions. And something I learned from, why is this not doing it? This was letting me do. All right, and then hold on. And then here I've got all my files that I put in for the general stuff. So this is the generic V2, generic Gen V2, my Gen V2 spreadsheet that you're given from the CDC on the general mapping that's done for all of the disease conditions. Here, this one is an example of my free marker file. This zip file has all sorts of files that are, I'll show that. That has a bunch of the files that I downloaded from the from the CDC website. Some of that's also duplicated. The notes for implementation of MMGs from the CDC website. The pertussis description. These are descriptions of the pertussis specific information and some other spreadsheets on it. This final thing is my XML model that describes my the XML structure of the way my Maven is described. So I've given it now everything that it needs here, and this isn't working, and I'm not sure why. But earlier, this does give me a way to let, try something. Right here, I can use, and this is something I learned from Andrea on one of our calls. I had done this manually, but this is now built into here. I can let Gemini rewrite my instructions for the gem, and it does an amazing thing. So when I have it rewrite my instructions, I need to check it. And it goes through and gives me much better instructions than I would ever do. Even with purpose and goals, which I didn't have in there, and all sorts of things in here. So anyway, that is an amazing feature, and I believe it has just been recently added to this. So I'm going to update and save my model here. All right, now let's go back out. And you see my model's right here. So I'm just going to click on my model and ask it. So the first thing I want to know, what am I missing in my Maven model that I need for MMG generation? So like I said, I'm just working on this and I haven't even done a lot of my initial analysis yet. So this is going to tell me what's missing out of my model that I need to make some changes so that I can do the reporting. So my basic model does not include vaccination information, which is true. I do have case classification captured in my model. I do not have all of the epi information that I need of symptoms. I do not have the source of infection, and I do not have the pregnancy and neonatal information. This is read my pre-marker code, and in my pre-marker code, it's a template scripting language, but this already tells me in my pre-marker code some of the things I need to look for, which I do have MMG lines, which that tells me every line I need to put in the MMG from the spreadsheet. It tells me which ones I need to do. It knows what I'm using as macros in there, and the create OBX is what I do to generate each observation line in the HL7. So this right here has saved probably about 2 days of effort if I just did this without even looking at any of this stuff. I can even tell it to generate, I can say, show me sample HL7 code for a confirmed pertussis case. This appears to be correct, but it just gives you an idea of how to do it. It tells me what all the segments are. So in this case, just for example, this has showed me exactly what the lines would look like, and this is correct for the first 5 lines of the MMG. It tells me the reporting state, which would be South Dakota. 46 is our reporting jurisdiction. I told it to do it for a confirmed case. It did it right here, as you can see from this HL7 triplet. Tells me the MMWR year and date. So let me say, redo this with the reporting date of January 31st, 2025. So January 31st, 2025 is MMWR week of, and I think this is actually wrong. MMWR week should have been just 05. I'm pretty sure it was right in this one. But I might be wrong. But of course, it's not always correct. And it did correctly say the reporting date for this would have been the symptom onset date, so that should work. So anyway, all right. Any questions, or anybody give me a question to ask my Jim and we can do it.
This is where we find out who's really in the weeds on HL7 message mapping. I know we've got some Washington folks who are.
No one? I've killed the room already. I've got other gems that I can show that are more general.
Does it do anything to find like misaligned data elements, or if somebody sent in an element that doesn't that doesn't actually exist in the mapping fields?
So let's say where does HIV? I'm just making something up. So HIV status does not show up in the MMG. So this is telling me about how it shows up in my STI MMG because it has this in its knowledge set that I gave it. So let me say, where does HIV status show up in the pertussis MMG? I could read it in a reported MMG and have it ask where it is. So here, this gives us the information that I was really looking for. I consulted the official pertussis MMG documentation and determined that HIV status is not a standard data element. I could also ask it something like, is the is somebody name a diagnostic test for me that's not in, that wouldn't be done in pertussis. So
like Western blot or something, since we're on HIV. That's old, but
let me check a symptom. So is itchy nose a reportable symptom in the pertussis MMG? And I misspelled pertussis, but it doesn't care. And this gives me an idea of what the symptoms would be that I would use here. I'm going to show y'all another gem just to start. Yes, Joe.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Chris, so some of the data that comes back is not correct. How do you figure out how to deal with that, or how to know what's correct, what's not, or how to test whether something that comes back is correct?
Well, number one, when I'm using this for guidance on all this, I would say, first of all, it's about 90% correct or whatever. When I'm doing it for coding, I have seen very few times when it's fundamentally wrong, but it gets some things not quite right. That I'll have to, the variable might not be right that it's trying to use, but when it's doing some things, it does absolutely perfectly. When I'm trying to do something like doing symptoms and all this, I would never trust exactly what it says. I'm using it more to get a guide or when I'm doing the first thing of trying to see where I'm missing some critical elements out of the MMG, like the first thing that I asked, when I asked this first question way up here, or it was somewhere in here. Well, I asked it somewhere and it said that I didn't have the case status in there. I do have the case status built in, but to my model, and it probably just wasn't apparent to it of exactly what it was. I probably could educate my model more by showing it some successful MMGs that were reported either from the STI MMG or some of the others, showing some of my output so it would analyze that output and also analyze my coding to figure out what's going on. Because it will do, for example, I could say, please generate sample marker coding for the lab section.
So I guess I hear you saying you kind of know the answer. This helps you sort of get down concisely to what some of the answers are and suggest things that you need to look at to make sure, like in that it'll list things that it thinks you missed, and then you'll go back and say, okay, well, I didn't have to look through everything. I'm just going to look at these things to see if this is what I missed.
Right. And what I just generated right here, some free marker code that would actually use something that I did before as on there to generate the lab results section. That's a repeatable section in the MMG. So it went through and told me basically what I need to do for the lab section. It does a wonderful job of it puts in comments as it goes through this. It typically breaks the coding down that it does into steps so that I know exactly what's going on. Tells me exactly what OBX segment, which some of this gets just confused. This makes it so much easier when you're debugging, when you've got these sort of comments in here, and this ends up putting the comments to the level that's, I don't know any programmer who comments as well as this does, especially when you're doing this. So I can see exactly right here. This is putting in the stuff up for the test results. And now it's doing conditional logic to figure out if it's quantitative or qualitative results.
Right. No, and I understand the coding aspect pretty well. It was more sort of when you ask it a more general question and it's looking through documentation and giving you back some responses, how you're, I still see it as, I can see at the same time, I'm just trying to figure out how you validate its response before you sort of act on its response.
So I think
in general, most of what it's done here for what I'm doing on here, I am not having to do a whole lot of validation because all of that stuff is already pretty much defined here. It's because I've already got the stuff basically should have been built into my model right here. I've got the CDC implementation spreadsheet I have to fill out, and it tells me what each line I have to go through and figure out what they are, which for some of those, for example, if I do that on my spreadsheet, for example, it will have symptom onset date. I can ask where is the symptom?
And to sort of add on to this, I think, you know, your deep expertise in this area makes it a little easier for you to just know kind of innately when something is maybe worth a second look, you know, like the field where you just kind of knew it should probably be a 2-digit value possibly. So, and I think that's something I've kind of said before, you know, in this group, like it helps to use AI in an area where you already have some expertise. So you can sort of have a kind of a sniff check on the results. But I think also for the way you've structured your input files, that's basically a mini RAG for a, you know, archive for an agent, and that's basically what gems are, kind of like very task specific agents. Then you can set those up, and then you may need to educate it if some of the variable names are really not intuitive or numbered, things like that, where you can go in and kind of add some additional knowledge base to the gems setup that can help it compensate for those changes over time, to just make sure that it's you're at least validating it against things that you've told it specifically to look out for. You can kind of build up your archive, I guess. That's what I would say about that. Go ahead, Avery.
Oh no, I just wanted to say this is a fascinating experiment into a use case of these kind of tools where it's not, we bump up against barriers of ethics and legality around patient information and tools. And I think this is a real interesting use case. And yeah, I think that, thinking about, I'm guessing it's probabilistic underneath the hood. And so, those little things. And, I'm also thinking like for needle in a haystack stuff and kind of agreeing with what you're talking about, partnering with the tool to help you, that relationship. And also, I think from my, limited experience using AI for work-related stuff, like tools like these, asking the right question, right? And I guess my question is like, because I don't know much about Gemini, is why are we telling it it's an expert in this and that, maybe reformatting our gem to be, tweaking with the formatting of what it is, right, might make it better at a certain task. And I'm guessing. So I'm curious about that, like why we're saying, oh, you're an expert in this, you're an expert in that, and maybe that's something that you could tweak with to it. Also, I'm sorry about the acronyms. I don't remember acronyms, so thanks for answering my question.
That would actually be an interesting test to do on here, is to test the results based on what you give it in the instructions, on saying what it's an expert in, or how to change those instructions. I don't know anything about it. I do try to make my instructions pretty clear, because I think I don't have any data to back this up. I think it helps the AI know where to look or know what you're really looking for. So, because I think it would answer differently if I said, instead of a public health informaticist who's an expert in this, it might give me much more basic information than what I'm trying to get at detailed information.
Yeah, I hear you. And my understanding is it's kind of like communicating with an alien. It's not like a human in the sense that we are. And so asking it specific questions or designing the questions in a certain way, like there is maybe more of an art than a science to doing that, but that getting, the spectacular results might be down to how we structure the prompts, to my knowledge, which is limited.
Yeah, the sort of discipline is called prompt engineering, and there's a lot of resources on that if you want to dig into it more. But that set of instructions, that's basically, you would define that as system instructions for how the model works within itself to retrieve information that it's been trained on, and then apply that to the task that you're asking it to do. So the more you can focus that in and kind of create the persona for the interaction that you're looking for, typically the better results you're going to get. And
yeah, I could be wrong, but is there a leak? Like, is it leaking into other prompts? Like when it was referring to the STI model, or the STI, when we were asking it that question, was it referencing like stuff outside of this gem?
It does reference some stuff. Yes, it does reference some stuff outside of this gem, but that STI model was built into the gem. I did have that as some of my source documentation, because I haven't written my code for the pertussis MMG and free marker. So I gave it that as some of the information it could rely on to help figure out things, and to leverage my same format and some of the other stuff that I did.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. It's, for the robot, it's like this is definitely robot work. So I hear you.
I'm giving y'all another example of just to show you some of the things that can be done here. So y'all have heard me say all sorts of things about my dissertation. So anyway, I'm in the middle of the IRB process with my dissertation, and I've gotten it bounced back one time already from the IRB yet of my dissertation proposal. So I have a gem that I wrote that actually wrote most of my IRB application, because I just put in my research plan and I put in there, and then I asked the gem all of the questions that were in the IRB application. I did test them and go through them and ask that. But right here, I just told this to give an evaluation of, I don't know which revision of my IRB proposal is, but it tells me what all the weaknesses are on my IRB, which are all pretty clear. Like, I didn't say that whether this was a full or expedited review. And then I do have the South Dakota Department of Health doesn't have an IRB. We're using ETSU's. It defined that right there. It thinks my timeline is too ambitious. It didn't like my vague description of data privacy, which they're yelling at me about. And it has that I'm submitting it for exemption. However, it says I'm probably not going to be able to get that. So, well, I know I didn't get that. So, anyway, this is just an example of where it took two highly customized documents and evaluated them to put them through here of using the gem.
Yeah, I think that
So
highlights the flexibility of these sort of mini agent, like easy to spin up on your own approaches to applying AI to especially things with dense documentation and lots of nitpicky requirements. That's something that I can see this having a high value for dealing with those sort of niche formatting requirements that we get from legacy systems when you need to move data from one system into another. And you're kind of highlighting Maven's very proprietary format, and then that free marker code base that they use is not a common thing. So I think the translation and the ability to query dense documentation is a real strength of these tools.
Well, like here's a good thing. So on my proposal, I just asked it a question: how am I protecting data privacy in this proposal? And it says exactly what it is. I've got a secure infrastructure, controlled AI environment, secure data tenant, HIPAA compliance, data filtering, limited data sharing, and IRB approval. I would never get all of those in my first chance of first trying to get this. Yes, Felipe.
Yeah, I have a question about your HL7 use case. Have you had an opportunity to compare performance and accuracy between different Gemini models? Like, have you also used 2.5 Pro and see if it gives you any significant different results?
No, I honestly haven't done any testing or comparison. I've actually used Flash and Pro both. I honestly think I like Flash better. It's faster to get the information that I need, because Pro can take a while to churn through it and do it. The differences I saw are small. I haven't noticed any major differences in what I'm getting in the output. Flash is faster.
And I think that's by design. Flash is meant to be kind of an all-purpose, lightweight, daily use model, while Pro is more for, you know, deeper reasoning and complex analysis. So that's why it takes longer. It approaches the synthesis of information in a different way.
So any other questions?
Gemini Pro's HIPAA compliant?
Depends on how you set it up.
Yeah.
I am not ever sharing, putting any HIPAA information in here.
Right.
No, I would not at all ever recommend that anybody put any confidential information into an open web portal like this. That's not gonna get you into compliance. But
Yeah.
you can, if you're using any Gemini or AWS, any of those models in a cloud environment that's within your institution's, you know, tenant on your state, you know, IT system, or
Yeah.
within firewalls, then you can absolutely set things up to be compliant, and you can limit the data, you know, transmission outside of the network. And there's a lot of networking things on the back end you can do to ensure that compliance. But in the open web portal like this, not.
Yeah.
None of them are. So
yeah, OpenAI kind of gave us, I work in San Francisco, County Seat of San Francisco, and OpenAI gave us like a free pro edition, and it was very promising as far as its, you know, useful tool that people are excited about. But they couldn't, you know, we couldn't get the legality of it. It just wasn't technically sound for anything that has people's information in it.
We're
Yeah.
using the Azure OpenAI, and we've got a secure tenant on it. We've also got ChatGPT that's supposed to be a secure tenant. They're real weird about it. But on our Azure AI, we've been assured that it's a secure tenant. That's what I'm doing my ECR research on.
yeah, that's because you have it in Azure and you have it in a cloud system that's safeguarded. But like if you were just using OpenAI's model development playground or something, that's kind of one of their big limitations, like that, because they don't have that storage and that infrastructure as a backend where you can establish those network connections in a secure way. So if it's just the portal, even if it's like their more built out one, you're not going to get that level of compliance unless you like really install things within your institutional network.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing.
And I see a question from Ronald about prices for HIPAA compliant OpenAI tenant. It varies. Usually it's based on some sort of like compute needs utilization, whether or not you already have Azure, because that's their partnership arrangement for cloud. So I wouldn't say that there's like a straight ticket price that I'm aware of that they would just, I mean, that's always going to be a discussion with the vendor, but I can do some research on it. I've actually been compiling a spreadsheet of like which ones are compliant with which federal level policies and which scenarios. It's a work in progress on the shared drive, but I can reboot some of that, and I'd be happy to share that out.
The cost we've got in production here using the Azure AI, it's doing geocoding for all of our in our disease surveillance system, and it had amazing accuracy, which is a big issue here with all of our tribal addresses. But it's moved our address, whatever it is, the success to over 90%, and in the mid to high 90s actually, and it has been a very small cost from what I understand of what the actual implementation cost has been. All right, I guess I'm through if no one else has a question or wants to ask my AI a question.
Thank you for sharing. That's amazing.
Yes.
Sorry, I
having-
had to figure out our had to figure out the new controls. It's okay. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I think my question was asked already, and it would have been regarding HIPAA compliance, but it was answered. So, this was very informative. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, Chris. Thank you. And I'll just steal the screen since we've got like a few minutes left, and just quickly share out this. Let me see here. Still getting used to Zoom, everybody. This doc here, this is the work in progress I was just linking to in the chat. Some of you already have access, but I have a shared drive for the collaborative network that I can put in the notes, and then you'll have access to it. But I've been kind of trying to grab the common tools that are in use and go through all their security policies and what they're doing for responsible AI, whatever that means to people, and jurisdictions that are using them. There's a lot that aren't publicly disclosed, so it's a little bit hard to figure out exactly what it is. But if you're using something or investigating something you'd like some research into, I'm happy to like grind through some security policies and see what's available. But tool vetting is something that I feel a lot of need to do, and also looking for malicious stuff. There's some stuff out there that I would not recommend, and that's also kind of here. We've heard lots of people tell me their horror stories from time to time. I'll say that. But yeah, that's just one of the docs that's in the drive. So we will circulate the drive link with the notes. I also have everything up on a YouTube channel for our demos. So that reminds me to stop the